Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of CRO Wisdom, the voice of risk leaders. I'm delighted to have Avani Desai of Schellman Group as our guest today. Avani, welcome.
Thank you, Atul. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. Avani, let's start by telling the audience what your role is at the Schellman Group.
Sure. So I'm president of Schellman and Company, and we are an IT audit and security assessment and certification firm. So it's funny because I tell people I work for a CPA firm, so they typically think that I work for a tax audit or accounting firm. We're actually a very niche, specialized certification firm where we focus on things like ISO certification, PCI, SOC assessments, and so forth. So really focusing around security and privacy, and risk management has a big play in what we do.
Great. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. So one of the first questions I ask everybody, Avni, is kind of like, how did you get started in the risk management profession? Because most people that I talked to didn't really start there; they started somewhere else.
Sure. So maybe I'm one of the unique ones that I actually came right into risk management. But I can tell you, I'm going to take you back a little bit. In college, I spent my days coding, and I'm not even sure I even knew what risk management exactly was. I graduated from University of Florida, had an engineering degree, and I focused on computer science. And I actually started a job with a big four accounting firm, and that's really where it began. I was hired into a group called Information Risk Management, and over time, I learned more and more, and I realized that I started acquiring this skill set centered around data, hardware, software, security, privacy, and
Yeah.
all of it really was able to kind of tie a bow around it, with risk management. So to complement that, I decided that I needed more business acumen. I realized from a risk management perspective that I had the technology skill sets, but you can't have technology without business. So I ended up going back to I got my executive MBA from the Wharton School, returned to my job, and took it to another level. And armed like that, I got comfortable in a space where now, what we do at Schellman and Company, we're able to help clients understand not only the risk issues within technology, but the risk issues within the entire business environment.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's good to see a different model where you actually started in this. So let's talk about kind of the impact of COVID and particularly more so think about kind of your plans for 2022. Where are you focused as you think about the risk market?
Sure. I was thinking about, the current risk environment and kind of the key priorities, especially with COVID. At Schellman and Company, we focus on audits to help our clients from security and privacy perspective. And the start of the new year is a really good time that we tell our clients, December, January, before we start the new year, look at the 12 months ahead and shape your plans, more precisely. With one thing we've realized, and you've probably seen it, technology is advancing at such a staggering speed that there's a lot of risks to prioritize for us and for our clients. And COVID just threw a wrench in all that, right? So we serve about 800 organizations, so we get ample opportunity to discuss what everyone's concerns are. And, I would say if you ask me kind of, what are some of the key priorities that I tell my clients and we have for ourselves in 2021, first and foremost is really going to be cybersecurity and breaches. And you probably hear this, and I've listened to other conversations as well. But the ever-present risk of cybersecurity is, especially in this COVID age, is supreme again. We are seeing breaches, some high-profile breaches like SolarWinds, for instance. So technology advancing, but unfortunately, so are cyber criminals, and that's why risk managers and IT teams have to have these stringent contingency plans and prevention strategies in place. Because you see it, without this, there's damage to reputation, there's financial issues associated with it, there's legal issues associated with it. That's why I talk to my clients. I tell them prevention and education is crucial and should really be a top priority. The other thing I would say from a priority perspective, it's a little bit out of the box, but what I'm starting to see again with COVID, the people who are able to pivot and who are able to be agile, we've seen success. So a major concern I have in the fight against failure to innovate and becoming obsolete. So, emerging technologies are coming at speed, understanding these. I mean, I take a look at supply wisdom, for instance, and understanding utilizing AI and RPA to streamline processes that really are going to give not only us internally, we're looking at it, but targets, um, a head start,
Yeah.
and you don't want to become obsolete, right? And the third thing I would really say, which is kind of ties into AI, is analytics. You know,
Yeah.
at Schellman, the power of business intelligence and big data and analytics is so important for us to mitigate risk, but also for me as a leader to see the overall health of the company, right? So yeah, there's a lot there's a lot of things to prioritize, but before we kind of leave this topic, the other thing is cloud, and
Yeah.
the technology and the risks. It may be the last on my priorities, but it's in my wheelhouse. And cloud technology is leading the way to what I call digitalization. And there's so many benefits of not having things like paper trails and so forth. And I think it's really important that we understand the governance, the regulation, the changing regulations about storing data. You
Yeah.
know, so yeah, those are the things that from a COVID perspective, what we have been
Good.
looking at. Yeah.
So let's take that thread, as you were talking about these rising risks and prevention and monitoring. So when you think about cyber as an example, or even other risks, COVID made assessments, in a sense, very challenging, right? Maybe not obsolete, but there was a period of time where you really couldn't. Things are opening up a little bit more with travel. So talk to us about how are companies moving to continuous monitoring? Do you see that as a trend, or do you see that as the movement or the addition of a next set of approach to risk management?
Sure. I'll say for our clients, we saw fit to incorporate continuous monitoring prior to the pandemic. And that could be because, they were remote workforces, distributed systems, but absolutely. The emergence of COVID has increased the need. There's no doubt about it in all industries and all sectors as well. But establishing an effective continuous monitoring program is not something you can do overnight. We get so many questions from our clients saying, "Oh, we need a continuous monitoring program. Can you give us a checklist?" And that's not how it works, right? It requires planning, effort, timing, a strong team, cross functionality, um, and you have to hit the ground running, as most compliance frameworks include continuous monitoring, recognizing that compliance isn't a point in time. So when we do things like SOC and PCI and FedRAMP specifically, there is a continuous monitoring program to it. So, at Schellman, we have incorporated continuous monitoring into our risk management program. But there's probably four areas that we tell our clients, first and foremost being asset management, right? And really having a thorough understanding of the devices and systems. And for us and most of our clients, it's cloud-based under direct organization is a massive benefit for continuous monitoring. For you to understand interdependencies, reducing vector attacks, for instance, sensitive data, how do you make sure? And the other thing I would say from a continuous monitoring isn't just about knowing what systems are in your ecosystem. It's really understanding the threat profile created for all the systems, right? Understanding what is the actual risk per system. I see so many times, and we've done that, and we've made the mistakes of saying, these are our risks, but we're not looking at the system specifically to understand kind of the underpinnings of it.
Yeah.
And one thing that we kind of forget about a lot is, adding to the threat landscape is reputational risk. It's not enough to know how your systems and assets are vulnerable. It's what are people saying about you, online. And at Schellman, we have tools that monitor posts and statements made about our company and our executives. We're monitoring things on the dark web, for instance. So it's not just critical to know if someone is planning something nefarious, but it's also negative statements. And I would say the last thing from a continuous monitoring perspective is probably more at a tactical level. It's important to implement multiple types of continuous monitoring tool. And, again, our clients kind of come to us and say, we want to implement continuous monitoring. Do you have a checklist? Do you have a tool that's going to help us do this? But that's not how it works, right? We have to conduct vulnerability scanning on our assets that are both physical and virtual, but also use behavior-based tools to monitor for irregularities. We employ something called a zero trust as a strategy, and it's not a buzzword, as our professionals, are either remote or on site at our clients, and we can't always be reliant, from a technology perspective on our firewalls. So yes, continuous monitoring. It it was there. Our clients embraced it, but post COVID, we're starting to see a lot more and more of it, and people are understanding the
Right.
actual need for it, and not just, hey, I need to pass an assessment, I need a continuous monitoring
Right.
process.
So, one of the clarifications I feel I constantly have to do in the market is I'll be talking to executives and they'll talk to me about they have a continuous program, and what they're really talking about is that they do assessments every year. And because it's continuous, that is, we don't define continuous that way. We define continuous as it's live all the time, right?
Right.
It's ongoing. So Avani, you were talking about cyber risk, and very clearly, right, cyber risks are rising. We've seen that effect during COVID, but COVID didn't start off as a cyber risk. It actually started off as a location risk and then cascaded into cyber. What are you seeing customers do in kind of expanding their risk aperture, their risk domains that they monitor?
Yeah. So we are seeing, one thing that I'm starting to see more and more is people are breaking away from quantitative risk. When I think of cyber risk, I think of quantitative risk, and trust me, I like that. I'm a number person, and that's the way my mind works. But it's also very important, what we're starting to see from our client perspective is they're looking at qualitative risks, the ones that are based on personal judgment and expertise of the assessor, for instance, or the board. They'll often use their own experience, but consult with others carrying out activities and best practice guidance, probably reaching out to you guys, from a decision perspective. Any risk in the area should come out during conversations they have with executive leadership, board managers, and that's becoming very, very important. And I think that that's kind of where risk management started. And then we saw it kind of going away from that and focusing just on quantitative,
Hmm.
financial risk. And but then it kind of comes back to what I was talking about earlier. Some of the priorities that we're telling people is, reputational risk is
Yeah.
very important, right? So that's what I'm starting to see more and more as the risk management process becomes very more robust at organizations.
And and are you seeing them, because often we see in companies these are kind of like siloed. Compliance is looking at compliance, and cyber looks at cyber, and procurement looks at maybe financial. Are you seeing it come together, be more integrated, so you get a singular view of these third parties?
Oh, definitely. What we're starting to see a lot more and more of is cross functionality. When you start the risk management program, before it could have been just IT and maybe the chief risk officer and their team. But now we're seeing HR, we're seeing compliance coming into play, we're seeing the audit team coming into play. So yes, there's definitely this cross functionality that is needed, because when you look at risk management and you look at enterprise risk, tone at the top, you look at cyber risk, you look at legal risk, it can't be siloed, right? If you just focus on the silo perspective, I can tell you from our assessment that's really where we see most of our issues is is because it's siloed, and there's not cross documentation, and there's not cross education, and there's not knowledge sharing. Which, yeah, from an auditor's perspective, without having that, you have a significant potential deficiency within
Right.
your report.
And how are you seeing AI and automation or data science having an impact on risk management?
Yeah, I mentioned one of our priorities is definitely AI, and I think um, AI is definitely changing risk management. The ability of machine learning models to analyze large amounts of data, specifically structured and unstructured, really improves the capability of, I can tell you from my perspective, compliance, risk management, technology across all the different industries, right? But what's really important, I talked about technology is really outpacing regulations, outpacing people. So to be able to identify these risks with all this data in an effective and timely manner, it allows me as a president of a company to make more informed decisions that are less risky, right? And so, a company like ours with 300 employees, we're small. So then take a look at a company that is having massive amount of data, to
Yeah.
make those decisions um, much quicker with less risk is just, it's invaluable. Yeah, I'm, AI and automation is that next level, RPA and blockchain and
Yeah.
all that next level of
Yeah.
technology that I'm really excited about from a risk perspective.
Yeah. I don't think a company can really keep up with all the
Yeah,
data, especially as their third party universe is also expanding for sure.
that's right.
So let me switch subjects. Bloomberg declared risk manager a hot job. So when you look across your hundreds of customers, is
Yeah,
risk manager a hot job? What do you think about that?
that's funny. You know, I was thinking about this, and I'm thinking about my career. I started about 20 years ago, and risk management professionals wasn't even a thing. Back then, risk employees were focused on insurance programs, maybe environmental controls, natural disasters, right? Um, and even from an academic perspective, when I had graduated from University of Florida and started with the Big Four in the risk management, information risk management, I tried to go back to say, where could I find from an academic perspective? And there was no programs focused on this career at this time. But I really think this pandemic has really, put us in hyperdrive um, into a field really overnight, right? Risk management now has the board's attention.
Yeah.
It's been given a seat at the table for input and consideration, just like when you looked at Sarbanes Oxley, and a financial expert was given a seat at the table. Given everything involved in the field, yes, 100% a hot job. And I was recently listening to a webinar by the National Association of Corporate Directors, and they said it, I think, the best, and I'm gonna remember what I can remember, but they said, chief risk officers need to be analytical. They need to evaluate everything from supply chain to staffing. They need to maintain relationships with law firms, insurance brokers. They need the power of persuasion for the board and executives. They need to communicate very savvy. They need to handle employees and media and crisis. And then they also have to have some financial literacy, right? To understand
Yeah.
company's balance sheet, how much money would be lost if there was a crisis, and so forth. So yeah, it's a hot job, but it's also a lot, right, on somebody's
Right.
plate. Um, and at the same time, they have to make sure that they're answering to the board and to investors and to executive management and to government regulators. Um, and yeah, COVID was a very tough time. And as I said, I think risk officers have become a necessity overnight because of this.
Yeah. So you just described a profession that's extremely dynamic, especially today. So what resources do you rely on to make yourself a better risk leader?
Sure. I think we're lucky that we have some of the most credible technology companies as our clients. So really a lot of my knowledge comes from speaking with executives and the boards at these companies. We're in there doing assessments related to technology and, security and privacy, and we're talking about kind of the top risks that they have, even if they aren't connected to, you know, technology because of the risk assessment process. I also do a lot of reading, peer-to-peer discussions, chats with vendors like yourself, and listening to your podcasts and so forth. So yeah, I still think that we are going so quickly from a risk management perspective that there's no textbook that's out there that'll tell you how to be a good risk manager, right? I think a lot of what we do is what we're having here, these
Yeah.
peer-to-peer conversations. And as I mentioned, these companies that we work with are in this day in and day out, and talking to risk managers and risk officers there to truly understand, the industry risks and the service line risks and so forth is just, again, invaluable for us.
Yeah, no, well said. I mean, I don't think risk leaders can no longer be insular, right? You have to open up and leverage the network.
That's
So
right.
my final question to you, what advice would you give to risk leaders, future risk leaders?
Yeah. You know, we don't live in a world for which conventional risk management, as I mentioned, textbooks or curriculums, or trainings prepare us. Um, when I think back and I look at COVID and how we could have predicted it and what we could have been doing better, I realized no forecasting model, except my son said The Simpsons. He's like, you should have watched The Simpsons, but no forecasting model really predicted the impact of we were going to have this type of crisis, right? And the consequences continue to take established economists and technologists and futurists and academics really by surprise. Um, but it's easier to be okay. What I learned through this is easier to be okay as a leader if you're agile and flexible. So when something like COVID or an economic crisis hits, you have to pivot and you have to pivot quickly. And that is going to make you a good risk leader. Being able to take the data and just running with it and pivoting, and being okay with that. Because, like I said, as risk leaders, we're very quantitative and we want to decide the likelihood, the impact, the effect, and so forth. But we're starting to see, you have to be able to be agile and you have to pivot. And with that, I think there'll be a lot of success.
Well said. You have to be agile and you have to pivot. I often use the words resilience as a key,
That's right.
right? As
That's
a key
right.
skill set.
Yeah.
Well, that was a great conversation. Thank you so much for making time to be on this episode. I wish you the very best in 21 and even greater success in 2022.
Thank you, Atul. It was great to be on. I appreciate it.